Welcome back, everyone. We hope you're well fed and well rested because it's time for tennis. Now, we don't actually have a ton of tennis this week. There's only one men's tournament, one women's tournament. It's actually kind of a nice, simple week. But despite that, Candace, we decided to roll Steve out of bed at whatever the hell time it is on the other side of planet Earth. How are you this morning, Stephen? Is the sun even up?
It's 4:45 a.m. No, the sun is not up. And the last time I did this, we spent far too long talking about Yen-Sun Liu. So hopefully we can talk a little bit more about some of the competitive players for this week in Monte Carlo.
Candace, do you have any thoughts on Mr. Sulu?
I don't, but I remember that day well, mostly because Alex said, I'm not going to talk about him. And then, I don't know, the lack of sleep rage just took over and it was beautiful.
And then he beat Sam Querrey.
Anything is possible, folks. Let's jump in. We're going to do just the men's tournament so far. So we've got the men. They're in Monte Carlo. It is a 1,000 Masters tournament. We're on clay. We'll start with the first quarter there. We've got the top half of the draw on screen. Novak Djokovic is the 1 seed. Zverev is the 5 seed down there at the bottom of the corner. We'll start with you, Candace. How do you see this first quarter shaking out? Is there anybody that can stop Novak Djokovic?
I mean, there is. Obviously, right off the bat, he has a very difficult prospect of a match there, no matter who it's against. I do think after that, for him, it does open up. And, what we'll kind of get into when we get into the bottom portion where Nadal is at is I thought of the 2 big name players. This was the more favorable section. Again, potential kind of landmine there right off the bat. And I mean, to be fair, anything can happen, right? When you're dealing with a guy who's coming back after having been away for a long time, prevailing thought is that they're most vulnerable early. But if he makes it through that first match, I would have to anticipate him going very far in the tournament because I do think things open up significantly after that. When you look towards the bottom portion of this quarter, it's a little all over the place. I have a little bit of time for Goffin in that section just because, well, he's been playing. And we know that he's kind of a workhorse and he's going to grind guys down. And I think you're seeing quite a few guys, someone like a Zverev or something who, it's not his best surface. And, even he's had a little bit of time away that could maybe be a bit vulnerable to someone of Goffin's nature. So I could see him winning a couple matches, but all in all in the quarter, I do see Djokovic coming through.
Yeah, it's a match with either, like you said, I think either Sinner or Vinolas will be good. I assume Sinner will be there. That should be a ton of fun. What do you think, Steve, about that particular little section in the quarter in general?
Yeah, look, I think we will be seeing Sinner versus Novak, which would be a really, really great start to the week. I mean, Ramos did look pretty solid this week, making the semi-final, but, playing there, I think he was serving for the match against Carreño Busta in the third set and couldn't quite come away with the win. But look, overall, this quarter, there's a couple of interesting clay quarters in amongst, the 2 seeded players there. Sonego's showed some pretty decent form in Italy this week, but has a tough first round and a quick turnaround here in Monte Carlo. Hurkacz has shown some promise. I think at times that, although he is, one of the bigger kind of lankier players on tour, he's got the movement and ability to handle clay reasonably well. But yeah, look, I think that, Sinner Novak second round match could go a long way to kind of shaping this quarter. Alexander Zverev has shown that he's decent on clay. It's just about whether he can kind of bring it together. And, unfortunately for him, I would rather him almost be in that second quarter, which we'll get to in a little bit. But, there's a couple of clay quarters and Livevic is another one that can really cause a little bit of trouble here. But they're 2 pretty big names, when you look at those seeds. And I think Sinner's probably the best chance to kind of knock one of them off.
Yeah, Zverev probably just a little overrated here. Specifically at this event, he's really struggled. He did make the semifinals in 2018, but you go back and look, he beats Mueller, Struff, Gasquet, and then loses to Nishikori in 3 sets. I mean, that's not really actually that impressive in my opinion if you start to go back and look at some of that. So it really feels like it's Novak's quarter. I think the match against Sinner, or what I hope is Sinner, honestly, again, no offense to the Spaniard there, but I really do want to see Sinner play Djokovic. I think that'll be a fun match, but I expect Djokovic to advance there and be sitting in the quarterfinals. where he will be playing the winner of the second quarter. We'll let you jump in here first, Steve. We got Tsitsipas at the top, Berrettini at the bottom. How do you see this shaking out? Who do you see playing Djokovic?
Good question. I think this is probably the more attackable quarter, I think, outside of some of the big names. Berrettini played some doubles, I think, with his brother last week this week in Italy, and that was his first real play back since he hurt himself at the Australian Open. So there is a little bit of, I guess, potential to attack in that bottom portion. And we'll get to it when we go through our value picks later. You could maybe make a case for maybe Engaged Life has worked well for Gael Monfils, or he could lose in the first round. It could really go one of two ways there. But look, that's again a bit like that first quarter. I think when you look at the first, that portion of three players at the top of it, you got Tsitsipas with the bye and plays the winner of Karatsev and Mazzetti. Karatsev's shown some promise on clay at times. That there's a few decent players there. Felix, Auger-Aliassime is I think working with Uncle Tony. So, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of unfolds there, but he's got a tough first round match. But I think there is a bit of promise and potential there that, Tsitsipas has shown. I think he showed at Roland Garros, last year that, he's up for it on clay. It's just about whether he can kind of put it together for, the course of this week. If he plays well, he should be able to get through this section. But I think there's that very tough first match up, and I don't think it's really going to get easier for him until probably that quarterfinal.
Yeah, I like what you said, Steve. That is one of the more attackable quarters in the draw. The seeds to me aren't terribly impressive. Do you agree, Candace, or are you seeing this differently?
I mean, from a betting perspective, I love this quarter, right? Maybe that's because the seeds do both look attackable. I respect that Tsitsipas over the last 12 months or so has shown a bit of improvement on clay. I'm still always wondering if this is the type of scenario. Obviously, at Monte Carlo, we tend to a lot of times get fairly humid conditions. I did look before we went on, and it does appear to be that way again. Just not sure that's necessarily ideal for Tsitsipas. That first round match, Musetti-Karatsev, that's going to be a hard one right off the bat. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if he went down right there, especially after, he had such a good beginning to the season. Is he going to be immediately up for it again, or will there be a little bit of time that's going to take him to really kind of work his way back into things? But this is a sneaky good group. I mean, you have Humbert in there, who's always serviceable, and you have Felix, who, you guys mentioned is working with Uncle Tony. Christian Garin, very good on the surface as well. So this is a fun little section. When I was looking through it and making my way through, I found it very difficult to kind of be sold on anyone. If I was going to pick someone, I would be looking maybe to Felix. That first round match is difficult, but I do think if he's able to win that one, he could potentially find himself in a little bit of a pocket if Tsitsipas has some trouble with either Mazzetti or Karatsev. So I'd probably be looking up to that kind of top portion of this second quarter. I think the bottom portion, if you have someone you love, hammer it hard. I just had a difficult time finding someone I loved underneath. I just knew I didn't like Berrettini, and that wasn't enough to go off of for me.
Yeah, as much as you have players that you want to bet against, you have to look and see. Hopefully there are some players you want to bet on. Unfortunately, the draw has put us in a tough spot here because the four players I want to bet on are playing in two matches, which means two of them are playing each other and the other two are playing each other. Musetti and Karatsev are playing some great tennis. Felix, again, working with Uncle Tony, who in fact is not a man who owns a deli. He is actually related to Rafael Nadal and coaches tennis. That was new to me. Sorry, I'm a little on the outside there. Garin, again, very good on the surface. If you have a strong feeling about who wins that match, maybe don't bet that. Just go in, grab the quarter price, grab an outright price for a little bit. I think that both of those matches are in really nice spots, and I think the winner of those matches come out with a real shot to make their way through this quarter. But, again, unfortunately, they're playing each other in the first round, and it really is tough to pick kind of through those two matches. But there was one that stuck out to me. We'll get back to that a little bit later. But I think that group of four, to me, I think one of those four probably comes out of here.
And although we probably haven't painted the strongest picture around Berrettini, I think his time will come later in the clay season. It's just more so the fact that, he did have that significant injury in January, and we just haven't seen him back playing singles since then. So, it might be a time, and there probably will be occasions, I think, over the coming months that, I'll probably be jumping into Berrettini to win 250 tournaments or 500 tournaments. So it's kind of just a biding a time thing, I think, with him. So it's more that rust side of things as opposed to him not being very good on clay, because he has shown that he can play some pretty solid clay tennis.
Yeah, and I think especially on this surface, I don't think it's going to take terribly long for him to get that fitness back.
Yep.
No, not at all. All right, guys, any other thoughts on these two quarters before we jump into the bottom half of the draw?
No, I'm happy to keep on moving on.
Start with the third quarter. Rublev there, the 6 seed, Nadal, the 3 seed, a handful of names there in the middle, but I'm not really sure it matters. What do you think, Candace?
It probably doesn't. I mean, I am going to kind of explain when we get into our individual selections, but we talked about Djokovic a minute ago, and we all said, oh, that first match of his is going to be really hard. But then I felt like after that match, things really opened up for him. For Nadal, it almost feels like the opposite. I feel like this, quarter of his should be pretty facile for him from the standards we've always seen from him, not just on clay, but here in Monte Carlo in particular. So I expect him to kind of ease through. If you were going to have another seed with you, I think he'd want it to be Rublev, probably, a guy who's not necessarily the best clay court player of all time, and, somebody who shouldn't trouble him all that much. I think he'd much prefer him there over, even a Schwartzman or somebody who we've seen upset him in the past. So pretty comfortable quarter for Nadal. I do think it gets more difficult from there, which we'll speak to, but at least to the stage that we're talking about, it shouldn't be too big of a deal.
Well, Steve, I hope that you have something to say about Nadal other than, maybe his knees will give out on him or something, but I got nothing. I mean, he's had a nice long break. He should be in good shape. He should be ready for this. He's been great at this event. He's won it a bunch of times. We were actually talking just before the stream. It's been over a decade basically at this point. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's got it. Well, anyway, as you talk, I'll count those instead of you making people listen to me count. But what do you think, Steve? I mean, anything to add again about maybe some of the interesting parts of the middle, or do you think maybe any of these guys can actually knock off Nadal or Rublev?
Oh, look, there's that big qualifier spot there next to Mannarino, and based on the comment from Zampa earlier that this is, Bernard Tomic's tournament to lose after he knocked off Herbert in qualifying overnight. That I don't see any, barring maybe some sort of vintage Grigor Dimitrov performance, or I don't think there's anything that I could confidently back in as being troubling here to Nadal in the third quarter. I don't see, a Bublik or Shardy giving grief over, a full best of 3 sets. Bautista Agut, Fritz, and Rublev are all kind of in that top chunk of this quarter. So, only one of them would end up facing Nadal. It's really tough to make a strong case, I think, for anyone else here.
Yeah, but Nadal's again won this event 11 times. Just really impressive. Again, like all the things you guys said, you got to like his draw. There's really no names there until he gets to the quarterfinal that really give him any trouble. Rublev's very good on clay. He's put up some spectacular numbers, but it's really hard for me to see him kind of overcoming Nadal. Now, if he's going to do it, it's going to be in a situation like this where it's 3 sets versus 5. I mean, if this is the French Open, he probably really doesn't have much of a chance. So maybe it'll be, to play devil's advocate there. Rublev has maybe got that circled and been working towards it, blah, 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 and, surprises the world something or other. But Nadal is the heavy favorite to win this tournament and should be. Any other thoughts on the third quarter before we jump into the fourth, guys? Medvedev at the bottom, Schwartzman at the top. There are some fun names here in the middle as well, but this kind of, to me, has a second quarter-y feel where, if you're looking for value, I think this is a quarter where the top seeds might not be there in the quarterfinals. What say you, Stephen?
It's, again, tricky, I think, in pockets. And yeah, like you said, with that second quarter, I think if you can find someone you really want to attack, then go for it. When you look at the potential run of, say, a Nadal to the semifinals and compare it to, Medvedev, who would be, Krajinovic or Basilashvili, then probably, potentially Fognini, who has obviously played very well here in the past. And then, one of Schwartzman, Casper Ruud, Kashanov, or Carreño Busta, or, Ger through, that top portion here. There's a lot of names who are capable of pretty good tennis on this surface in these conditions. I would probably go, I'd maybe search a little bit outside of kind of the bigger names here, and maybe you could make a case of Kashanov, maybe, if you can get on a little bit of a run here. I don't think, Diego Schwartzman just has the first round bye, which is, good for him, but probably gets Casper Ruud first up. It's tricky kind of wherever you look, but I think, if you can get one of, Ger or Kashanov to maybe, knock off Carreño Busta coming off a long week, you could maybe make a case there, but it's, looking down the bottom, Fabio has obviously played well here, but it's hard to trust him over a whole tournament at the moment. And it's a tough first round there against Kekmanovic. Hard to know. Benoit Paire is another one. So there's erratic players. There's also some very good players. Good luck trying to find who kind of comes out of jumble. But it'll be an interesting quarter to watch. And I think if you do feel like you have an edge on someone, then there is a possibility to attack here as well. Which is, I'm not saying anything that's, I think, a great surprise that I've said you can try and attack the quarters that don't have Novak and Nadal.
It is, in a way, a very simple, but, I like to think it's intelligent. I don't know. What do you think, Candice?
I think it's intelligent. I'm going to be really interested in watching the first round that is match O Scandinavia between Rune and Ruud. Rune obviously has been struggling a little bit as he's trying to kind of move himself to this much bigger stage and much bigger level, but we obviously know he has a ton of potential, especially after what we saw from him in Chile earlier this year. Ruud feels like he's on that cusp as well, obviously at a higher level than Rune, but he feels like these sorts of tournaments on clay should be within his reach of making a deep run. He just hasn't really quite been able to do it yet. But I don't mind him in this section. If he were to get through that first round, which he should against the 17-year-old, he'd go against Schwartzman, who, again, is going to be tough, but very, very beatable, not somebody who's just going to, completely hit you off the court. Then after that, you're looking at Kachanov or Ger, like two serviceable players on the surface. But again, it's not Nadal, it's not Djokovic. I feel like this is the type of section that someone like a Ruud should be able to make it through. If you're ready to move to a higher level on clay, which I think we all kind of agree he has shown the potential for that, then this is the type of section you should be able to beat. I think for him, I'd be most concerned of him playing against someone like a Fognini later in the tournament, but that relies on Fabio getting there. And aside from that, it all feels like players that he should be able to beat. He just has to do it. So I would lean towards a Ruud, and he's someone we'll talk more about as we get towards the end of the show.
All right, guys, any other thoughts here on the bottom half of the draw before we jump through our picks to win? Hopefully find some value, maybe give a few people a pass and tell you to pass on a few people.
Just quickly, maybe, look, the tricky player, I think, to get a read on here is Medvedev. And when I kind of go back through all his form, I think, that 2019, I think he was terrible on clay in 2018. 2019, he kind of came relatively out of nowhere at that time and played some pretty solid tennis on clay. And then, last year was kind of, it all kind of got thrown up in the air, and there's nothing that there's not too much you can take from that. So look, it'll be interesting to see how he goes here. I think his movement is obviously, he's good at covering the court, but I just think he's got, some question marks around his patience and his shot selection, hitting those flat ground strokes. But he'll probably make me look silly like he did in 2019 a couple of times. But it'll be interesting to see how he goes first up here against, either Krinovic or Basilashvili.
Yeah, that'll be pretty interesting. All right, let's jump into our picks to win if you're ready, Stephen. I know that you're driving the bus, so I'll let you pick the order.
I am. We will start. Let's start with you, Alex. Who's your ace for the tournament?
This one was pretty easy. I'm taking Rafa. Again, it's the 11-time winner, the handful of time defending champion, someone that should be rested, focused. I expect his career to sort of look like what, we saw this year. Play the Australian Open, go get himself ready for clay season, play clay season. I'm curious to see if he even plays Wimbledon, given some of the schedule changes and things like that. But I think he's really focused on making sure that he wins these events, maintains enough points so he can maintain a seat at the French Open and keep doing all this stuff. So he's definitely building to this. He is the favorite. I think he has a very manageable draw. All signs point to Rafa for me.
And I'll just quickly piggyback off you there. I've also gone with Nadal. He made me look silly in the French Open final, and I don't think I'm ready for him to make me look silly again. Candice, who is your pick for the tournament?
Well, this pick was with the mind and not the heart because it was Djokovic. I spoke about it a little bit before, but my prevailing thought when I looked at the draw was that Nadal has it far easier early. And then likely, I would think in the semis, he'll have to play somebody who, might not be a top 5 player, but somebody who is probably a clay court specialist, because there were a number of those at the bottom of the draw. And then obviously you go against presumably Djokovic. I thought Djokovic, it was kind of the reverse. I think that he has that very difficult first round match, likely against Sinner, as somebody who we know is good in his own right and knows him well. I believe they've trained together. I believe his coach Djokovic at one point. So, very, very familiar foe there. But after that, I thought his draw opened up. And I thought, okay, well, looking at the final, which one of those two big players is most likely to make it to the final? And every time I looked at that, I thought that it was Djokovic. I thought there were more clay court players who can kind of go on a tear at the bottom of the draw. So that was the thought.
That seems more than fair enough. Now, value picks has been a little bit tricky because there aren't that many outrights available really at any of the major bookmakers. So this has been a little bit trickier. I might kick this one off. I've gone some small obscure book that I'd never heard about has Gael Monfils at 300 to 1. And he seems to be in that pocket that I was mentioning, I think, there in that second quarter, where if you want to try and go against Berrettini, that you could maybe see if he could go on a run. Look, he'll probably either lose in the first round or maybe make a little bit of a run here. Who knows? He seems happy now that he's engaged after breaking up. So, look, that could go one of two ways, but he couldn't really play much worse than he did at the start of the year. So, look, hopefully the clay brings a change of form for him. But I think you could make a case, as I said, in that second quarter or even in that fourth quarter, if you can find one of these players who are, triple figures, I think in this tournament, away from Nadal, you can maybe turn them into a bit of a trading selection there. Candice, who is your value pick for the tournament?
Actually, Steve, real quick, you said 300 to 1. How low would you play that? Again, we don't have real prices, so how low would you actually go on that number? 150.
Yeah, it'd need to be north of 200.
Okay. Sorry, Candice.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm all warm and fuzzy. Love is in the air. I can tell that Steve is inspired because of it. My value player is going to be Casper Ruud. I suppose I tipped my hand when we were talking about the section. I just thought he's, we know that he's very good on the surface, and I felt like the guys he's likely to go against are solid players without being spectacular. And I really do think this is a player who, we've kind of all tipped him at various points to kind of really make that kind of top echelon breakthrough, and this feels like the pocket that he should be able to do that. I had looked late last night, and I saw him on the exchange at 50, which felt very, very fair. I mean, I was tempted to make him my pick for the tournament, but the prospect of having to go through both Nadal and Djokovic obviously put me off. But a player with a ton of ability, so I guess you could check the exchange. I didn't look that hard. It might only be like $2 at 50, but that was what we saw.
That's a good one.
And Alex, who have you gone for?
Similar to Steve, try to pick a really big number here. I'm going to go with Christian Guerin. He's right around 150 to 1. I'd play this down to 100, any triple digit number. But in general, though, I'm trying to play probably quarter prices here as opposed to outright prices. Even at a big number like that, especially anybody who is, again, given that Djokovic is the top and Nadal's at the bottom, all these guys are probably going to have to beat them twice. And you start to look at what some of those prices are going to be, minus 400, minus 500, minus 600 twice. You might actually do better than 100 to 1, 150 to 1, just doing like a rollover money line kind of thing. So I'll probably actually end up looking at quarter prices. That'll be my value pick, quarter prices over outright prices. But I'll be looking to do something with Christian Garin for sure. I think that he is definitely underpriced.
I think when you look at a lot of these players that we're picking, whilst we will be supporting these players, we will also probably be cheering pretty hard for Jannik Sinner in that second round, or
hey,
or if you are on Novak, that Manarino or a qualifier to knock off Nadal early. I think it's going to take a big scalp to really bring everyone in. But yeah, I think we can maybe pop up a link when those quarter prices are out, and maybe put a little bit more to it then when there's a little bit more available. Looking to our unforced errors, I'll kick off because I kind of went a little bit early with it earlier, talking about Matteo Berrettini. It's more just the fact that there will be rust there. It's pretty competitive, and to come back, having not played in nearly 2 months and walk back into a Masters 1000 is, it's impressive if he does go a long way here. But I'm happy to kind of give him a wide berth and try and find some other people in his part of the draw. But I think if he can hold on to that kind of 8th spot, or find his way into a decent pocket of a draw at the French Open, that he's someone that will probably be there into that early to middle stages of week 2 if he can find his fitness and find his form. Now, Candice, who have you gone for as your unforced error?
I have picked Hurkacz as my unforced error because last time I checked, there's no palm trees in Monte Carlo. And I think 2 places I was able to find outright prices, and in both of them, he was a shorter price than Ruud, which to me was crazy. I mean, I understand he's played well recently, but his good play seems to be confined to one region of the world that we're not in. And he has a tough draw. I mean, the qualifier, we'll see who that ends up being, and that could be good or bad. But even after that, you're thinking maybe Lajovic and then Djokovic. I mean, he could easily lose right off the bat there in his second round. So I don't like his draw, and I don't think that he's going to play well here, as we see when he has to travel away from sunny old Florida. And so, a player like him, even though you look and you see him at 40s or whatnot, that still feels really, really short for mine.
Yep, that seems fair. And Alex, who is your unforced error?
Pablo Carreno Busta, quite simply because he is playing in a final tomorrow. There are first-round matches in Monte Carlo tomorrow, so he is going to have to play his final tomorrow, get on a plane. Now, it is only about a 4-hour flight to get to Monte Carlo, but play the final, get on a plane, go to Monte Carlo, and probably play the next day after the final. Even if they do, maybe they give him special dispensation. He gets to play a round 1 match that is the third day. But if there are no day 3 round 1 matches, I mean, he's playing the day after a final, haven't been on a plane. So this draw is really tough already. I think that you're crossing a bunch of names off, and his sticks out to me given the travel spot and the fatigue spot for him.
Definitely. And like we said with our value picks, we're moving now to our overvalued players. Again, a little bit tricky with not a lot of odds available. I'll lead this one off. I've gone with Andrei Rublev. I think in this type of draw, if you can get as far away from Nadal as possible, that is generally a good starting point. I don't think Rublev's far enough away. The one book that I did see, I think, had him in that kind of high teens price, and I'm just not sure that's value there, being so close to Nadal in the draw. He has shown some promise on clay, late last year, but it's not his best surface. And sometimes he can get a little bit frustrated and kind of lose patience a little bit, I think, against players that can just keep getting the ball back and kind of keep things in play. But Yeah, look, it's at that price of that high teens, given the caliber of this field and how strong they are on clay. I just thought that was a little bit short. Now, Candice, who have you gone for?
I have gone for Tsitsipas. Again, going off the two very small locations I saw in prices, he was sitting around that 14 mark. We've spoken about him a number of times in this segment already this year, it feels like, because he had such a good start this year. He was kind of that player last year already coming into this. And so, we know that the hype is around him enough that he's going to start attracting attention in these kinds of tournaments from a betting perspective. And I just don't think this is the spot. Like, I mean, he's gotten better on clay, but it's definitely not his best surface. If there's one big jarring negative I saw about him in Australia, it was his propensity to be stubborn, which I think on clay in particular is not going to serve you well. If you get caught up in long matches against guys who are going to try to grind you down, being stubborn is probably not going to be the way to get the job done. You have to be malleable. You have to be willing to adjust. And I mean, I'll be frank, when I went through and did my bracket, I had him losing to either Musetti or Karatsev. I think either of them could beat him. And it's a little bit of a shame because he has a beautiful draw, all things considered, for a Masters 1000, and one of the more prominent ones at that. But I just don't love him at this location or on this particular, the humidity and the things that we like. And I think he has a really, really tough match right off the bat. But, otherwise he should have been happy. He's away from Djokovic. He's away from Nadal as much as you possibly can be. But, I think you have to, when you're dealing with players like him who are really on that cusp and who are going to be getting attention tournament after tournament, you have to be really picky about the spots when you're going to pick them. And I think it has to be spots where everything is going to align that you see. And I don't see that here.
And I think if he couldn't make the most of his draw in Miami on hard court in better suited conditions to him, it's going to be interesting. If he can turn it around and somehow win a clay Masters 1000 with Novak and Nadal back in the draw, then fair play to him. But it is very hard to see, I think, on what we've seen from him recently since that semi-final loss, I think, in Australia, when he does seem to carry over those losses and not be able to kind of move past and move forward after in those tournaments after big losses. Now, Alex, who have you gone for?
This is probably something we can clip and just run back for a whole bunch of shows for these clay tournaments. Daniil Medvedev will continue to be in the top 3 to 5 favorites, no matter what tournament he enters, because he's very, very good at tennis. He's, I think, the number 2 player in the world right now. Has a chance to maybe sneak into number 1 and finally kick Novak out for the first time in a while. Not here, not on this surface, not with this draw. It's just really, really messy for him. He ends up, near Nadal. He would have to beat Nadal and Djokovic to win this event. So, you can kind of just throw him out there already. You shared the comment from our buddy Zampa there. Not very good on clay. This one's pretty easy. So, for most of clay season, I think he'll continue to be overvalued. And, 12-1 is just hilariously funny to me.
Hilariously funny.
Yeah, if anybody wants to bet him at 12-1, I'll give you 15-1. DM me.
Well, I mean, I felt the same hilarity over Tsitsipas 14. So
right.
Some of these, it's always kind of flows in between when I think in any sport. And I mean, I come from horse racing, but it's a similar philosophy. And I always say anytime you have a really, really heavy favorite, and in this case you have 2, the people with the least amount of value is often that next tier, right? You'll often find you'll have some crazy long shots that are still, should be bigger prices than they are because people are just reaching for big prices. But a lot of times when you have very heavy favorites, you can actually make the case that it's the favorites who offer more value than that, C, D, E player, because people are just looking for a logical alternative.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And look, it's just worth mentioning because I've been pretty critical of his schedule, I think, over the last couple of years. But it's nice to see Dominic Thiem not playing every tournament and maybe being a little bit more picky and knowing that, he's not at his best. He's not near his top form and wants to, go through a bit of a training block now that he's clearly now at that point where instead of playing every tournament under the sun, he's going, well, my target here is Roland Garros, and I will kind of work towards that. So it's nice to see him kind of take that step, because it's been a long time coming.
He's learning. He's growing.
He is.
Finally
And that's
happening.
nice. It's nice seeing growth in front of your eyes, isn't it? They've done very, very well. Alrighty. I think that is all for ATP Monte Carlo.
Oh, there was one more thing I thought we should mention. Because there's a bajillion reasons why Nadal would win. It was not spoken about here because it's like a laundry list, but it is worth mentioning because you did just talk about Medvedev. I think if Nadal makes the final and Medvedev doesn't make the semis, that he gets number 2 back. Obviously, it doesn't take a lot of motivation or additional motivation for Nadal ever, but I think we know that these types of things are always very important to him, so something to keep in mind.
Now, I'm going to be a little bit greedy. I actually don't mind if Medvedev does have that number 2 spot, I think, by the time Roland Garros comes around, because I would love to see Nadal and Novak on the same side.
Yeah.
and give that opportunity to someone on the other half to go come along and make a final, and even if they can, somehow, it's going to be tricky, I think, because Tsitsipas is so far behind Thiem, I think, for 4th in the rankings, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how that pans out, and at least have the option there of, a Nadal-Novak semi-final instead of what we've come to see over a longer period of time. So, as I said, I think that wraps up Monte Carlo. We'll be back tomorrow to cover off it's called Charleston 2, isn't it?
Charleston 2. We haven't come up with a cool neighborhood or weird place that we'll have to explore.
Because one wasn't enough for Alex.
No.
Yeah, 1 was enough. So let's have 2.
So we'll go straight back into that. And we have a special guest, I think, who will be joining us. So more on that tomorrow. And we'll try and kind of pan this screen out for those who watch along live. And it might look a little bit more user-friendly with 4 of us here. But we will, we'll be back in probably just over 24 hours or so. Maybe not at 4 a.m. Melbourne time, 2 days in a row. Thanks for everyone who's tuned in live or has listened back on the podcast. I think we're on most podcast platforms now. If you just search for Eat Sleep Tennis, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Eat Sleep Tennis Show. Have I missed anything there? We've got est.show on Instagram. I think, if you follow one of the 3 of us, we will try and get some more, I think, information up once some more odds become available for Monte Carlo. I'll be doing my full Betfair preview for Monte Carlo, so that should be up Monday morning Australian time. There'll be plenty of content, I think, to consume, I think, on this tournament. And it's nice to see these big clay tournaments back. And, as we head towards Roland Garros, which is now a week further away than what we thought it was going to be. But that's okay. As long as it doesn't interrupt the grass season. I didn't get the grass season last year, and that needs to happen this year.
Definitely.
Alrighty. Thanks again for everyone who's either watched along live or is listening back. And we'll be back tomorrow. We will